Washington Journal continues.
Miriam Blakey is president and CEO of the Aerospace Industries Association. Thanks for coming in and talking with us.
Happy to.
Sequestration is looming. This is a series of cuts that will affect the U.S. Government across the board, but it will also hit the defense industry. Tell us what your concerns are.
Basically, it is a slash across the entire federal budget, $1.2 trillion. The difficulty from the standpoint of defense is that the Budget Control Act last summer already cut $487 billion out of our defense budget. Now we're talking about another $500 billion. That goes beyond the muscle, way into the bone. It's a very dangerous prospect.
Tell us about the Aerospace Industries Association. Who are the companies that you represent?
Basically, we manufacture the technology that keeps our warfighters safe. Everything from the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter through ships, all the way through commercial airplanes, space. We are part of the manufacturers that support NASA, for example, and our satellites, missile defense.
Is it just defense companies that will be affected by this, or are there other ways that you see this having an effect?
No, it affects the whole economy. The defense industry really, when you think about it, permeates all 50 states. Their bases, their small and large manufacturers, there's training, there's maintenance. All of that means that when you do take this kind of money out of the defense budget, it has a tremendous job loss effect. Just in terms of the research and the procurement dollars in defense, it's over 1 million jobs that we will lose in our economy next year, in 2013. When you look at it across the entire sequester, and here I'm talking about domestic discretionary as well as the defense dollars, it is 2.14 million jobs that are lost. I mean, that's crazy in this kind of economy to do that kind of self-inflicted wound. We can't do it.
Miriam Blakey is president and CEO of the Aerospace Industries Association. She served a 5-year term as administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration and was also chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board. If you'd like to talk with her about defense cuts and sequestration, here are the numbers to call. Democrats 202-737-0001, Republicans 202-737-0002, and independent callers 202-628-0205. Why can't the defense industry operate with less?
Well, the defense industry is already operating with less. When you think about it, we have a very much reduced force out there. We have planes, equipment that has been really ground down in 2 wars. Go back to the 1980s, and there were over 600 ships in our Navy. Now it's less than 300. So believe me, there has been a drawdown, and between the fact that we have fought 2 wars, as well as the fact that we have been reducing in many ways, there's no question about the fact that our defense dollars are being stretched right now.
The Stimson Center has a critique of a report that your group put out, voicing concerns about how these the hits could affect the defense industry and have ramifications on other sectors. And it says that the flaw is in the number this is going off of. By going beyond the direct job losses and projecting the indirect and induced jobs that would be lost from defense cuts, the analysis seems to accept the notion that nothing else will happen in the economy. In the real world, these jobs, which are nearly 2/3 of the 1.1 million, particularly the induced jobs that are linked to defense spending, are also attributed by economists to every other activity in the economy. So it's a web that's far more linked, and this raises concerns that it might be two-dimensional, your link to the defense industry and the ramifications on the economy. What's your response to that?
These are good, high-paying jobs that exist right now. These are people who go out in the economy and buy furniture, get a lunch, do the kinds of things we all do, support the local dry cleaner. Tell people on the Space Coast that this has not had an impact on small mom-and-pop businesses as well as the economy there. Believe me, the drawdowns there have been felt already, and the concept that it doesn't affect the overall economy, take a look at Brevard County alone. They have had tremendous loss in their economy of other jobs as well. This was done by noted economist Stephen Fuller of George Mason University. He does these kind of economic analyses all the time on demographics of our country and jobs. He does know what he's talking about.
Let's go to the phones and have David join the conversation, a Democrat from Las Vegas, Nevada. Hi, David.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, my comment is this. A couple of years ago, the Government Accountability Office completed their audit of the Defense Department, and they identified $120 billion a year in waste, fraud, and abuse. Cutting $60 billion would only be half of the waste, fraud, and abuse. Secondly, I've worked for many government agencies over the year, and I will tell you that every year, about 2 months before the budget, a fiscal year was over, they would come around and tell us, we're under budget. We got to spend more money or they're going to cut our budget. So they'd authorize overtime, they'd buy furniture, they'd do every weird thing to spend as much money as possible. So we could cut 10% off the federal government budget without touching one job. That's my comment. Thank you.
Well, I wish it worked that way, but it doesn't. The study you're talking about, of course, is some time back. Since then, the Defense Department has been drawing down heavily, hopefully addressing some of the things that were less necessary, some of the things that we could do without. Certainly, Secretary Gates worked very hard, and a part of his team is still on board at the Department of Defense, trying to have better efficiency, better buying power for the kind of equipment we need. So they're working at it very hard. But at a certain point, you can't absorb these kinds of massive cuts. And remember, these are not surgical cuts where you can say, all right, there's waste here or there's something we can do with that there. In point of fact, these are cuts that are across the board. They hit the just and the unjust, as they say. And this is something that really is a terrible thing, because we have a very strategic plan for how we're going to use reduced resources for our national security. When you cut everything, it's indiscriminate and it's senseless. A Democrat who leads the House Armed Services Committee, Adam Smith, Congressman Smith, said it's insane.
Let's take a look at the numbers of sequestration and the defense budget. It would mean $450 billion in cuts over the next decade. And as our guest, Marion Blakey, mentioned, that's in addition to $487 billion in decade-long reductions from the 2011 debt limit law. Well, we'll hear in a few moments words from the chairman, the ranking member of the Armed Services Committee in just a few moments, Congressman Smith. But in the meantime, here's what Joe tweets in. American Hero is his Twitter name. He says, the purpose of the military is not a jobs program.
Right. Absolutely true. And we make that point all the time. First and foremost, what we're talking about is the fundamentals of America's national security. When you look at that alone, you realize that this will have devastating consequences. Secretary Gates described it as catastrophic for our national security. We're trying very hard to pivot with the new strategy that the President and Secretary Panetta announced back in February. Greater focus on Asia, on the Pacific, trying to make sure the Straits of Hormuz stay open. All of that takes real equipment. It takes ships, it takes planes. This is expensive technology, but it's technology we have to maintain. That is something that really is at the heart of this, is protecting the warfighter. One of the things that I think is important to realize is that as time has gone on, we have put our young men and women who go into battle in with technology that surpasses everyone else's. That is what has given us both success, and it has also protected them in a way that you haven't seen in previous conflicts. We have to be able to continue to do that. That's very fundamental in this.
Reston, Virginia, Matthew, Republican caller. Good morning.
Good morning, and thanks for taking my call. I've tried a long time to get on, and I get confused sometimes what the numbers are for Democrat and Republican, and sometimes I get confused myself whether.
Let's actually, we lost that call. I mentioned a few moments ago we're going to hear from Congressman Smith. Let's take a listen.